I am Melvin Adams, your host for the State of Education. Thank you for joining us. I have in the studio today Dawn Justice. I met her recently as she had been running for school board and was elected, and actually had the privilege of her attending one of the summits that we put out recently. And not long ago, I received an email from her that started out like this. I quote, "Unacceptable materials in schools? Who defines what pornographic materials are? In the Commonwealth of Virginia, Virginia Code defines it. So about 10 days ago, I began an investigation into the books which fall into the category of pornography due to the following definition from Virginia Code." Here's the definition. Sexually explicit content means 1, any description of, or 2, any picture, photograph, drawing, motion picture, film, digital image, or similar vision representation depicting sexual bestiality, a lewd exhibition of nudity, as nudity is defined in Code 18.2-390, sexual excitement, sexual conduct, or sadomasochistic abuse, or also defined as in 18.239, corporophilia, urophilia, or fetishism. Wow, quite a definition. Well, that's my little comment there. She continues, "What I found was disturbing, alarming, and something that you as parents need to know about. You need to understand the tools that you have at your hands." And she continued then with a list of content found in their library. Well, Don, thank you for your courage. Thank you for talking to the parents so they know what's going on in their schools. So, Don, welcome to our show.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a privilege.
As you might guess, we're going to talk about the problem of graphic sexual content, often called porn, in our school libraries. But to start off, Don, why don't you share a little bit about who you are and why you distributed this recent letter?
Thanks, Melvin. I'm happy to share. First of all, I am a homeschooler of 8 kids. I've been homeschooling 18 years, and I consider our family political refugees from the Pacific Northwest, where we can see teenage CRT full blown and what Virginia has to look forward to if we don't get a grip on this. So I ran for school board and got elected, and my platform was to inform parents, to equip them for engaging with their school system, and to be involved in making the difference they need for their kids. So part of that was the libraries.
Mm-hmm.
So we're in a rural area. It's very conservative, very family friendly. My dad likes to joke. It's like Mayberry.
It is.
And yeah. And so I, of course, like everyone else, have seen the news articles about what's being found in libraries, and knew I needed to research that. So after a meeting, I came home and I sat down at my computer at about 10:30 at night, and I looked up an article in Texas about I think they had 850 books they were looking at being evaluated, and then a secular article from, I don't remember who it was, but it was NBC saying, here are 50 books that people want to get banned and why. So I started to look through our library catalog. And what I found was so disturbing. It was so alarming. Every time I discovered the resource of Laverna's Index of Books from Utah, where it had verbatim excerpts of the passages that were in these books. And so I would go and I would look and I would breathe a sigh of relief when we didn't have that book. But what was included was it was gang rape, it was molestation, it was all manner of evil that was being depicted in lifelike manner. And it was traumatic. It was really traumatic. And I'm like, parents have to know that their kids can find this stuff in the library. And it's, in my opinion, it shouldn't be in the library. And the law says that it's inappropriate to be available to minors at the very least, but especially without parental input or knowledge.
Wow. Well, thank you for taking that time and doing that kind of research. That is exactly the kind of leadership we need to have on our school boards, people who understand what parents care about. And, listen, let's just be honest. Pornography is not what our kids need to be studying at school. Okay. There's a lot of good content that they should be studying at school, and that's what our schools should be all about. And so by just even having the courage to step up, do this research, and then communicate out to parents so that parents know what's going on and they can know, look, how can I get involved to either warn my kids or also engage the school system so that we can bring some changes in what we have in our content. I want to thank you for that.
Thank you, Melvin.
And so here's a question I have. Why do you think that porn has managed to find space in our schools on our schools' bookshelves? Who do you think is behind this? And what is the reasoning in favor of pornographic graphic material in our libraries? What's behind all this?
Well, it is a leftist agenda. Even secular sources are noticing this restructuring of American society. It does go back to critical race theory, because critical race theory makes the assumption that the American society has been structured in a racist manner that the very institutions are. And so you need to dismantle those, which you see happening in New York City. You see it happening in Portland, Seattle, Los Angeles. And they want to they want the state to become the parent. They know the children are the future. So in the article I read earlier today with Newsweek that was done by a homosexual man who is not a conservative, but was sharing that the new homophobia is the new extremist LGBTQ activist group, that he, as a homosexual, is outside because he's not queer enough. So he says their objective is to blur the lines of gender, family, because they assert that gender is a part of the system that wants to subject people. So it's a revolution. And the kids have been the most vulnerable. And take me, I'm a homeschooler. I did not have my children in school because I wanted to direct their education. I wanted to be the primary influencer. I wasn't involved with the schools. But what we have seen is that what happens in the schools pours out into our society.
Yes.
So we're seeing drastic rises in the types of crimes being done. against women, children, boys, even men. And, lust by its very nature desires newer, more different types of stimulation. And the children are the ultimate, the children are the object. They're the heart. They're the heart of our society.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I think is going on.
Yeah. Well, Don, you made a statement a bit earlier that I think is so profound, because a lot of parents look and they say, wait a second, I see all this stuff in certain communities, the far west. I see it in, big urban centers. I see it in, places like that. But, like you said, I live in Mayberry. I mean, we're an ideal, quintessential American community. And surely that stuff's not in my schools. But the reality is the system is filtering that stuff in everywhere. And they're not just targeting certain communities, they're targeting everywhere. And it's systemic. And I think parents need to understand that just because they live in a great community, a lot of good, wholesome people in that community, doesn't mean that that stuff isn't getting into their schools. And they need to be aware that it is, and they need to get involved to make sure that it doesn't impact their children. The best way for that to happen is to get it out.
Yes.
Well, there's this statement that says, even the best intended decisions can have unintended consequences. We've heard that, and we know that to be true. What consequences are you seeing in our school-age population because of exposure to graphic content? And what do you believe we will see in America down the road due to the pornographic content that we are experiencing right now in our schools?
Well, I think the first thing you see is a voice is being taken away from the children. If they're being taught that gender is not what you were born with, or your sex is not biological, and by the way, you need to not be you need to not be judgmental or condemning, which we don't want to be judgmental or condemning. But what ends up happening is that children are in this formative time when they're forming their identity of what is right and wrong, what is normal and abnormal. They're being groomed for minor sex. They're being groomed for adult to minor sex and other forms.
Yeah.
And other forms. And if you notice on the LGBTQT trademark, they keep adding letters to it to accommodate all manner of deviations from normal, healthy sexuality.
Mm-hmm.
And so you'll see them being more vulnerable. You'll see the natural curiosity that they have leading them to be exposed to things that are now available in the school library. Before they might have to find it at a neighbor's, they might have to find it at a store or in the garbage. But now it's in the school library. And you have, for instance, in our district, we have a teacher that has asked students if what gender they are, middle school. So you also see it creates a sense of confusion in the students of what to expect. And when kids are confused, they start to act out more. So I think you'll see more acting out. Mm-hmm. I think just like you've seen in the Northwest, the sex trafficking of minors and prostitution is going up. And that does not help us.
Absolutely. Well, I think one of the most challenging issues with this whole agenda, especially targeting these younger children, it's causing them to question who they are. Everybody was born with a particular gender. I mean, science clearly defines that. And I don't care how you feel. Most little girls go through a time when they like to climb trees and do things that, they're called, man, you're a little tomboy, but that doesn't mean that they're a male trapped in a female's body. Give them a little time. They're just a child. And, in time, their hormones will kick in and they will typically become a fine young lady and vice versa. But people are created with certain genders. And when an adult starts causing them to question their identity, especially when that adult is doing so without the knowledge, consent, authority of the parent, I mean, that's just not okay. Because what ultimately happens is then the child becomes confused. Well, who am I really? And all of a sudden, they just go into this massive state of confusion, and that sticks with them perhaps for a lifetime. And part of being a mature, responsible adult is discovering who you are and what your God given abilities and interests are and what your passions and so forth are. And, those things come over time and generally naturally.
Agreed. And I think that a parent is the only one who knows that child's needs and how to communicate with them on gender dysphoria,
Mm-hmm.
or I like to do this. Is there something wrong with me? If their child does have a mental illness, maybe they might have ADHD, they might have depression. Only their parent or caregiver likely know the types of traumas that are already in their experience
Mm-hmm.
and how to navigate that discussion.
Mm-hmm.
That is not the job of the schools. The schools are not equipped for that discussion. They don't know their student well enough for that discussion.
Yeah, good point. So, who decides what goes into a school library?
That's the process that I am learning. So, teachers may suggest a book for their classroom. There are lists that a librarian may consider. One of the things I've discovered is that one of the major American library associations is actively pushing these overtly sexually books.
Mm-hmm.
And they do it under the guise of, oh, this has a good message, and we'll just ignore the sexually explicit content. And that's the thing that surprised me, is that when I was reading this article, I think it was by the Daily Wire, it was quoting different authors, and these authors were saying, I'm so sorry that they can't see the broader message because of this questionable content or sexually explicit material. It's not that they're saying there isn't any, they're saying it doesn't matter.
Mm.
And most parents are saying it does matter.
Sure. It's interesting. I was having a conversation with another individual a while back, and he was making the suggestion that if we had a policy, and I'm sure something like this could be done school system to school system, if we established a policy where every book that was added to the library had in the front front cover, inside the front cover, stick-on thing that says this book was added to the library on such and such a date by approval of, and you have two people's signature there, names and signature, who authorized that book to go there. Then there'd be some accountability and probably a lot of content that parents would disagree with would not make it into the libraries. What do you think of that idea?
I think that is a really good idea. What we put our name to, we take more thought in doing and considering. But when we can do it anonymously and kind of even shift the blame to someone else, we're not as responsible.
Mm-hmm. So you're a school board member, and you're trying to help your school system do better, and really serve the community. That's what you ran on. That's what your goals are. That's what your full intentions are. And I appreciate so much the work you're doing, the boldness that you're taking. But here's a question I have for you. How can parents and teachers bring about positive changes in their school libraries? A lot of times, parents are either ignorant of what's going on and you're trying to help educate them, or teachers may or may not be ignorant, but sometimes teachers are afraid to make statements because of concern for their jobs and so forth. You're a school board member, and I realize that you can't make policy by yourself. It's the whole school board that establishes policy. But what would you suggest? How can parents and teachers, what can they do to help the school board make things better?
Parents and teachers need to have courage. They need to be willing to take that step to communicate to their principal, their school board, their librarian. They need to have boldness that when they send an email to their librarian or to their principal, I would copy the school board members on it, because oftentimes the school board members don't know, and we're supposed to represent our citizens. But if our citizens are not speaking to us, it makes it a little difficult.
Mm-hmm.
I personally think a paper trail is one of the more effective ways to gain traction, and it's discouraged. So the question that I heard was, you're going to make the school system look bad. And my response was, what makes the school system look bad is ignoring this and not talking about it.
Right.
If we, as soon as we become aware, start to talk about it and have discussion, it makes us look good. Everyone knows that sometimes we have things in our homes, in our libraries, that we don't know about. A well-meaning person can say, oh, this was a Newbery Prize winner. Oh, this was Pulitzer. Or, oh, this is an evocative book about the experience of an abused child. But they don't know the details in there, and there are very few resources out there to tell them.
Yeah.
So that would be one thing I would do. And be respectful, but be persistent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really good point there. Respectful and persistent, they go together. So often, people become belligerent and then people stop listening. But if they're respectful and yet just diligent and don't quit, sooner or later, they will get attention and can work on these problems. So just kind of as we start to kind of hone in here and kind of wrap it up a bit, with pornography, and I realize our focus here is on the schools and on libraries, but you've been a homeschooler, you're a mom, you have 8 kids. So here, let's just talk to parents for a little bit, in addition to stuff at the school, okay? With pornography being so accessible and prevalent today, How can families provide a healthy mindset for their children to help them resist this kind of material?
That's such a hard question. Lots of dialogue. When they have questions, talk to them about them. If you don't know the answer, ask someone you respect and keep asking until you find a good resource. If with our 8 children, from the time they were little, my husband and I started taking one child out a week, each of us, to go do something fun. It might be eating a donut and playing a game. It might be swinging at the park. But what that does is it builds fellowship. It builds opportunity to have those awkward discussions.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some very good books out there that help prepare children in how to protect themselves
Mm-hmm.
in our highly over sexualized culture, that do it in a way that does not take away their innocence. And so those are some resources. It's a very uncomfortable conversation, but it's vital.
Mm-hmm. Very well said. My wife and I have 6 grown children. We have 19 grandchildren now, and 20th one on the way. And obviously, any parent, this is always a struggle. This is always a concern. And I think, uh, you know, I agree with you. The most important thing to have is a relationship with a child so that you can speak openly and in trust, so that they feel comfortable and confident in speaking to you. Um, and as a parent, I think just having that intentional, regular time where it's our time, and you can talk to me about anything you want. You can ask me any question you want. And I think what happens is when the kids feel that safe space, they will talk about the things that are on their minds. They will talk about those questions that are coming up, that topic that was brought up. Somebody said something or somebody whatever, and it was like, what's that all about? And it's in that safe space with the parent that often that child, if they have that safe space, that child will bring that up. And then, how that is responded to is also critical. If it's like, oh no, you don't even talk about that, well, then you shut that conversation down. But if it's like, well, tell me more. So what was the context? What was said? Okay, well, then you direct them in helpful, productive conversation that's age appropriate, that helps them to sort these things out in a true way, but also helps to strengthen their own confidence in who they are and strengthen their relationship with you as their parent. And I guess I would say to every parent out there, um, you know, we have feet of clay, and there is no perfect parent. I certainly made plenty of mistakes myself. But I tell you what, those kinds of intentional behaviors in parenting uh, cannot be overemphasized. They are absolutely vital. And so, Don, thank you for speaking to us about that today. Um, just do you have any final comments or statements you want to make to our listeners? Maybe if you have specific resources or anything?
So, two things I would say. One, as far as parents, if you have children that are very introverted, I know of parents who have put a little notebook under their pillow so their shy child can write down that question they just can't say, and then the parent comes at another time and looks at it and writes. And so that's one way that you can connect with your kids.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I would say is there are resources out there. if your child is having a hard time or you're having a hard time with that conversation, don't be ashamed to go to counseling or to another couple.
Yeah.
My final piece of advice would be, if you have concerns about your schools, try to be involved as well. So if you're able to volunteer or communicate the good things as well as the bad things, it helps. But I know a lot of parents are super, super busy, over the top, but so there's a lot of resources out there. I would say we are in a really good place here in Virginia and in a lot of states, because of where Oregon, Washington, California, and New York have gone. We can get ahead of the ball in our own states. And I'm very encouraged by the parents, the grandparents, and the everyday citizens who are saying, hey, our schools really matter.
Yep.
Thank you for the opportunity, sir.
Don,
I appreciate
absolutely. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you for what you're doing to reclaim America's education culture right there in the county where you live. You're doing a great job. Keep up the good work.
Thank you, Melvin. You too. Thanks for being out there to support all these citizens.
Thank you. If you enjoyed today's episode of The State of Education, please hit that like button and subscribe. You may also feel free to share our podcast with your friends. We are able to share these podcasts because of generous support from our donors. If you'd like to learn more about the work we are doing at Noah Webster Educational Foundation, please visit our website at NWEFoundation.org. It's our blog site, or our main website is NWEF.org. NWEF.org.